Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Micah, the 6th chapter. As you see in the subheading, God's indictment of his people. And in Micah 6, it's really dealing with the controversy, right, that the Lord has with Israel. And so it's somewhat themed as like almost like a court setting, of the Lord bringing up charges against Israel, and then eventually going into the judgment as a result of that. Once again, a recurring theme of the message that the prophets delivered onto Israel. The base of it has always been the Lord sending his messengers to get his people to turn back, to get them to stop, going off in these wicked ways. And in fact, it's also interesting because it makes sense why the Lord sent Yahushai, right? Because he kept sending prophets to tell them, hey, like, I've given you ways to live by, and yet you don't follow it. We made a covenant, and yet you continually break it. And he kept trying to get Israel to go on the path of following the statutes and commandments the Lord had set before us, but they just kept on going off and off and off. And so now with the second covenant, okay, you wouldn't be able to go off even if you wanted to. All right, which is really the permanent solution to this problem. But prior to that, you're going to need to do some house cleaning, which we'll be seeing soon as the Lord brings that judgment. So this is Micah chapter 6, verse 1. Hear ye now what the Lord Yahweh saith. Arise, contend thou before the mountains, and let the hills hear thy voice. All right, so basically here, the what the Lord has to say against you, and contend, right? Plead your case before the mountains, right? And the hills. Here, the mountains and hills are being personified to be likened onto witnesses, as they are they are inanimate objects, but you can sort of say, been there for a very long time. Okay, so here they being personified as witnesses. Hear ye, O mountains, the Lord Yahweh's controversy, and ye strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord Yahweh hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. Now, when you look here at the term controversy, where it says here, Rayab, it says here, controversy, dispute, controversy, case at law, right? So it's almost like the Lord is bringing Israel up on charges here, right? And he's saying hear the Lord's controversy or his lawsuit against Israel. Why? For breaking the covenant. And ye strong foundations of the earth, for the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. Now, the word plead here is not in the typical sense that you use it in the English, right? When you say to plead with somebody, it's more like to beg them or, try to plead your case. Here it says to correct, to rebuke, to prove, to argue, right? To be chastened, to convict. So here it's saying that the Lord is going to basically bring up charges against Israel, right? Verse 3, O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. So the Lord says, well, we entered into this agreement, right? Show me what I've done that violates it, right? Show me, how have I gone wrong? How have I done you wrong? How have I stressed you out? Testify against me. Make your claim. Bring your testimony. Oh Lord, on this account and this account and this account, you did this, that, and the third, and this is why we also did this and neglected our part of the of the deal. For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt and redeemed thee out of the house of servants. And the house of servants was that slavery or that bondage that we were serving in Egypt. And the Lord redeemed us, having raised up Moses and Aaron and Miriam, but mainly Moses and Aaron, to lead us out of Egypt. And I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So the Lord is like, you were in slavery, you were in captivity. I delivered you. O my people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, consulted, and what Balaam, the son of Beor, answered him from Shittim on to Gilgal. Now, Balak hired Balaam, to curse Israel, right? To put a curse on them. You can read about that in the book of Numbers. Every time Balak would would consult with Balaam to try and put a curse on them, the Lord would turn that into a blessing for Israel. And he's saying here, remember that when the heathen were trying to put a curse upon you, how I turned that to be a blessing. And remember from Shittim on to Gilgal. Now, Shittim on to Gilgal, these were like different locations where Israel encamped on their journey from the wilderness into the promised land. And I believe Shittim was on the east side of Jordan before we crossed over onto Gilgal, which is on the left or the west of Jordan. Now, in order to make that passage or that crossing, which being led by Joshua, remember the Lord repeated to an extent what he did with Moses in parting the Red Sea or the Gulf of Suez in half so Israel could walk on dry land. Well, the Lord did that during the time of Joshua, except it wasn't the Red Sea. It was a different body of water. I believe it was actually the Jordan. And from one end coming downward, the Lord had it be like a wall, and then the rest of the water dried up. Continuing on down. Let me see if I can find it. Book of Joshua. God parts water. Yeah, I guess this could just describe it, and it looks like it's in Joshua, the 3rd chapter. So it says here in the book of Joshua, God parted the water of the Jordan River for the Israelites to cross into the promised land. God instructed the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant to step into the flooded river, and at that moment, the upstream waters stopped flowing and piled up like a heap, while the people crossed over on dry land. This miracle, which established Joshua's leadership and mirrored the parting of the Red Sea by Moses, served as a memorial, keep that in mind, to God's power. And this is I believe in Joshua, the 3rd chapter. Let me just confirm that so you can read it if you need to refresh your memory or if you're not familiar with it. Yeah, Israel crossing the Jordan. So Joshua, the 3rd chapter goes into that. So the Lord did that. And he's saying here, remember that. I delivered you from Egypt. I protected you from that curse. I performed this miracle on your behalf so that you can cross on dry land into the promised land. Remember these things that ye may know the righteousness of the Lord. So you can see, I've done my part in being your God, being faithful and helping you and delivering you and taking care of you. But when it comes to you, in turn, you repaid my kindness and my good and my righteousness with evil. And now in verse 6, it switches like to the perspective of Israel here, more so looking for, what is it that the Lord requires, right? What will please the Lord here now? So it says, wherewith shall I come before the Lord Yahweh and bow myself before the high God? So how can I present myself before the Lord? Like, how am I supposed to do that? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves of a year old? Will the Lord Yahweh be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression? The firstborn meaning your child, your son or daughter or whatever, for my transgression as a sin offering, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul. So what is it that's gonna appease the Lord? Should I bring, will a burnt offering be enough? Will a calf be enough? Will thousands of rams be enough? Verse 8, he hath showed thee, O man, what is good. So no, the Lord has already told you what it is he requires. It's not it's not in the multitude of your offerings, okay, but in the ways that you walk after him in righteousness. That's what the Lord requires. So he hath shewed thee, O man, what is good. And what doth the Lord Yahweh require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God? Because when you do these things, you're going to naturally, the laws are written to lead you into a mindset of doing these things, operating justly, not fraudulently, loving mercy, right? Forgiving, and walking humbly with the Lord. That's what he requires. The Lord Yahweh's voice crieth unto the city. And how does the voice of the Lord cry unto the city? By way of his prophets, right? By sending his prophets with a message onto the people. That's how the voice of the Lord cries. And the man of wisdom shall see thy name. When you go to the word see, it's it's not in the literal sense of to see with your eyes, but more so to revere or to fear, right? Yerah. It says to fear, revere, be afraid, to stand in awe of, to inspire reverence for godly fear or awe. So the Lord, as it says, his voice cries in the city, and those that have wisdom are going to fear the Lord. They're going to take heed to whatever message it is that the voice of the Lord is crying out, whether it's a warning or in most cases it is a warning, but whatever it may be. Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it? And the rod here is going into the rod of chastisement, which, the Lord has many means of that, be it a foreign nation that he raises up against us. It could be famine. It could be diseases. These are all used as means of chastising Israel. As a matter of fact, gonna get a quick precept for that. Just gonna hold it on deck for now. Damn, it just escaped me. How does it go? 2nd Ezra 16. And just coming back here to the word rod. Here we go. So it says here, a staff, branch, a rod, because in a physical sense, typically, right, this is what a rod looks like, but it was used for chastening, right? As you can see, whether for chastening or figuratively correction. So let's read here in the Chaldee lexicon, just getting straight to the point. It says here, specially used of the rod of a king, a scepter, of a soldier's spear, of a rod used in chastening. And then it gives the precepts. The rod which smote his back, other precepts. Violence has risen up to chasten wickedness, whence used of the punishment itself. Micah 6 and 9. Okay, so the word rod here is used in the sense of chastening. So what it's saying here is take heed to this rod that the Lord has, right? And who hath appointed it, which is the Most High. So if it's a famine, if it's being sent into captivity, if it's, pestilence, it is to correct you because you're going in the wrong way. And the Lord is the one sending it. And the precept that I wanted to get in 2nd Ezra 16 is, 16 verse 19. Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. When you're scourged, it's like being disciplined with a rod so that you can amend. You can change your wicked ways. You can turn back to righteousness. You can learn your lesson. But for all these things, they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges. So going to show you that the Lord can use famine, plague, tribulation, anguish or captivity as part of his rod of correction. Verse 10, are there yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, and the scant measure that is abominable? So the Lord is saying, like, so you guys still have. Now the treasures of wickedness is referring to the riches or the gain, the ill-gotten gains that that these wicked Israelites gained from defrauding or oppression or whatever, other underhanded means they used. Okay, and that's why it mentions the scant measure. Scant measure is like an unjust measure that is abominable. So something like shrinking the ephah. Ephah was a measurement. So like today you may say like 1 cup or 1 gallon or whatever. And some measurements were used to measure dry goods and some for liquids. So if they were to shrink an ephah, we all know what 1 cup is, right? Or 1 gallon is, but they would physically have this 1 cup be smaller, right? An actual smaller size cup as opposed to what the standard of the size of a cup would be. So if you came to like the marketplace, or you came to where they were selling and you were like, oh, can I get 2 cups of this? Yeah, you'll see them scoop, 2 times with that cup, but the actual size of the cup is much smaller than it should be. So you're paying market price for something that you're getting less of. That was wicked. The Lord did not like that at all. In fact, he mentions that in Proverbs 11. Skip that real quick. Proverbs 11:1. A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. That balance is going into the weights, right? Or the scales. And just like they would shrink the ephah or another measurement, they would also use unjust weights because, once again, you would have a balance and then you would say, I want, I don't know, two chicken legs or something like that, right? Okay, they would put the whatever it is you're trying to buy on one side of the balance, and then on the other side, they would put the weights. And they'll say, oh, okay, so when it levels out, and the kind of balance I'm talking about is this, a balance or balances, something like this. So you put the goods on one side, you put the weights on another. Once they balance out, you say, okay, it's, I don't know, 3 pounds or 3 whatever, that equates to this amount. That's how much you got to pay. Using using unjust weights would be like, let's say you have the average weight is, I don't know, 1 pound or something, right? You would use a lighter weight, and that way you can put instead of something that actually weighs 3 pounds, since your 1 pound weight is actually weighing, I don't know, like 0.5. I'm just giving an example here, arbitrary example. Your single weight measurement in actuality weighs 0.5 instead of 1 pound. So what everybody else would measure as 3 weights to get you 3 pounds, you would double that. You'd have to put 6 weights in order to get the actual heaviness of 3 pounds. It's like inflation. And then you would charge them that. You say, oh, well, it's 6 pounds. So because you can see each weight is 1 pound, but in actuality, each weight is 0.5. That's just one example of like shorthanding or using gaining ill-gotten gains, defrauding your neighbor. So they were using all these kinds of tricks to make money. And that's why the Lord is referring here to the treasures of wickedness, right, in their houses, and the scant measure, right, that they were using to gain this. Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances? Once again, like I just gave an example, and with the bag of deceitful weights. So the Lord is saying, you still got, your houses are full of wicked, ill-gotten gains. You're scamming one another. You're not, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why I'm bringing charges against you. Am I supposed to, consider these, this money and this treasure you've gotten as pure, even though you're using underhanded means? Verse 12, for the rich men thereof are full of violence, right, through oppression. And in previous chapters, we've gone into examples of how they use violence and oppressive ways to gain riches. and to keep their riches while oppressing the poor. And the inhabitants thereof, the people of the land, have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. So what does that go into? That goes into lying, right? Obviously and literally, but in the sense of in business, right? Or in matters that you're supposed to be truthful, whether it's bearing false witness, whether it's, you know, in the marketplace, like I just gave an example of, right? This cheating, this scamming, this lying, they did that. Okay. And it was like so prevalent that the Lord is describing it as this is pretty much all you see throughout the land. Therefore, also will I make thee sick in smiting thee. So as a result, I'm gonna judge you, right? I'm gonna smite you and wound you. That's what that sickness goes into, and wound you in making thee desolate because of thy sins. Because you continue to sin, you continue to add iniquity onto iniquity. So I'm gonna bring that judgment against you. Verse 14, thou shalt eat, but but not be satisfied, and thy casting down shall be in the midst of thee. When you go into the word casting down, it goes into the feeling of like hunger, or that hollow, empty feeling you get when you're hungry or when you're starving. It says a sinking feeling, emptiness, from an unused root, meaning to gape as the empty stomach. Hunger, casting down. Now, if you've ever fasted for a long time, maybe 2-3 days, eventually you start to see if you don't drink any water, you don't eat any food, your stomach gets smaller, and it actually becomes harder. Like you start getting lightheaded, it becomes harder to stand up straight, right? Your body starts to sort of, cave in a bit more because now you're lacking energy, right? So as it says here, this account is found once in Micah 6:14, referring to hunger or emptiness of stomach. So this is a physical reaction here. And the Lord is saying, right, you're going to eat, but you're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to have enough. And you're going to get this empty feeling, this hunger in the midst of thee, right? So within you, you're going to feel this. And thou shalt take hold. Go back. And thou shalt take hold, but shalt not deliver. What that means is your means of trying to preserve yourself, whether it's your resources, your food, your money, none of that is going to work. And that which thou deliverest will I give up to the sword. So the little that you're able to preserve or hold on to is going to be taken away from you, when the Lord brings, captivity upon you, because that's what your captives are going to take, whatever little you have. And then verse 15 sort of continues on that, right? It says, thou shalt sow, but thou shalt not reap, which represents captivity. Because when you sow, it represents captivity, but also if you were still in the land, by the Lord bringing certain calamities upon you, you could, in the sense of actually sowing and not reaping, you can plant, but if the Lord doesn't have the weather go accordingly, well, you're not really going to harvest anything. All right. But it's mainly in the sense of being a captive, because it's signifying you're going to do the work, the labor, but you're not going to reap the benefits. So when you sow, that a lot goes into that, right? You got to clear the field. You got to gather out the stones. You got to make the furrows. You got to have the oxen, yoke them together. You got to set up the plow. You have to have the seeds ready. You have to now break up the earth and then drop the seeds in it, and all those things, water it and all that. So you do the work of sowing, but thou shalt not reap. And the reaping is the harvest of it. Now, you might actually end up physically doing the labor of the harvest, but you're not going to reap the actual benefits of it. That's what it's signifying here. Thou shalt tread the olives. When you tread the olives, once again, you're doing the labor of stomping on the olives, right? And it's also work to get the liquid form of it. But thou shalt not anoint thee with oil, right? You're going to do the work for it, but you're not going to be the one getting the actual oil and to be able to use it. And sweet wine, but shall not drink wine, right? So you're going to be able to do the labor to make it, but you're not going to benefit, and getting to drink it and enjoy it. So, for example, when you're taken captive to another nation, when you're serving as a slave, you're working, right? If you even take most recent time in history with the African-American slave trade, right? They were doing labor. They were picking cotton, but they weren't getting rich, right? They were doing all that labor, but they weren't getting the benefits of it, okay? And even in today, right? Corporate America, you go in and you put in work, and the work that you put in is not the reward you get out. Yeah, they'll give you a little bonus here, or they'll give you a little salary here, but compare that to how much they're actually making. Do you think Jeff Bezos is making all that money because he's the one in the actual warehouses? No. You got Amazon warehouses everywhere, but it's laborers that are in there. Majority of them are Israelites, but they're making chump change. Verse 16, for the statutes of Omri are kept, meaning like the ways of Omri. Now, Omri was one of the kings of Israel, not a righteous one. But the Lord is saying, you follow after the ways of Omri, right? And all the works of the house of Ahab, which we know the works of the house of Ahab, Jezebel, Ahab, all the wickedness they did, even murdering a man for his inheritance. And ye walk in their counsels. So the Lord is saying, you move after the ways of these wicked kings, that I should make thee a desolation, to provoke me to bring desolation or judgment upon you, and the inhabitants thereof an hissing. The word hissing goes into derision, which goes into mockery. Therefore ye shall bear the reproach of my people. Who are the people of the Lord? Israel. And what is the reproach of Israel? being made destitute and having to basically hear and witness the nations around looking down, mocking and reproaching you. So the Lord is saying, because you decided not to follow my ways, but you wanted to walk in the footsteps of these wicked kings that have been before you, then you're gonna suffer the judgment or the consequence that comes with that. And lastly, I'm gonna pull up here just a quick account of Omri. 1 Kings 16:25, it says, but Omri wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord Yahweh, and did worse than all that were before him. For he walked in all the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And what was that? Idolatry. And in his sin, wherewith he made Israel to sin, to provoke the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, to anger with their vanities. All right. So that brings us to the end of the book of Micah, the 6th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kudash. And until next time, Shalom.